Overwatch is a game that has always had its social pitfalls. From people on the official competitive teams being called out for using homophobic slurs, to banning and depriving players of their competition winnings because they spoke out in a pro-Hong Kong manner, to the issue of the game itself being entirely non-canon, and basically an advertisement for the sequel that's hopefully set to come out in the next couple of years. There've always been plenty of controversial stories to take in. One problem that seems to have followed Overwatch throughout its 5 years online, though, is the topic of whitewashing its characters. While some of these allegations were proven to be issues of lighting, there's been one consistent point, or shall I say, character, of contention. Hey hiya ho ya out there to all my big brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, and of course, mommies and daddies. Let's talk about everybody's favorite cowboy Jesse McCree and discuss his new Overwatch 2 look. But before we get into that, let's take a look at his treatment throughout the game's history itself. Something that has always had fans, and fan artists especially, at odds is how vastly different his skin tone varies even within game elements. Here's some of the sprays depicting him. Spot the difference? Some have him as tanned as his in-game model, and some, especially the cute spray, have him notably lighter. This itself was an argument point for a lot of people within the fandom. Many spawned headcanons of him being of indigenous descent or being Latino. Some people got called out as racist for using one spray's color palette over the other. Some argued it was likely just another issue of lighting, along with many more fandom discourses you can probably look up on Reddit or Tumblr. The bottom line here is the fact that the Blizzard game, design, and comic teams, though less in relation to the latter, never seem to match up. Maybe it is a matter of artists themselves adding their own ideas to the mix. Or maybe it really is just a case of choosing the brightest lit color palettes for some of these sprays. Though, if you take a quick gander at his finalized concept design, it seems to be closer to his base skin in-game. Why they wouldn't just use that as a template for their sprays, I can't say. Whatever the case, McCree definitely got the Minecraft Steve treatment when it comes to his merchandise. Now, however, with the sneak peeks of Overwatch 2 that we've gotten, it seems like the definitive answer good old Blizzard has decided to give us is, oh nah man, he's white. Which, understandably, has some people a little bit rankled around the feathers. Here's what McCree looks like in his mock-up for Overwatch 2. And here's what he looked like before. I mean, I personally hate that they removed his serape and replaced it with a weird cape with a lapel, and I'm not the only one who sees that they're basically turning him into Matt Mercer here, right? Not to say Matt isn't hot stuff, because I think he is scrumptious, but even I, who am not immune to Hot Man Thirst Trap, thinks this is a little not to my liking, to say the very least. But back on topic. One thing many people have said is that it may just be lighting. That's what was going on with the alleged somber whitewashing, so maybe it's what was happening here too. He is in a white void of a background with no additional light sources after all, so maybe our McCree would look the same if he had the same lighting. Only we have seen him in at least similar lighting. In the anniversary event iCatch, we can see McCree in something close to that same white color void. It's a little bit grayer, but the point still stands. Here's a quick comparison, and I gotta say, yeah, it looks like he is much more tanned in the Overwatch 1 anniversary image. And not just as in he looks more shaded. the hue of his skin looks warmer here, right? But let's look at this portion of the teaser as well, because you can see McCree in his full cinematic majesty right here. It's even a dark scene, so if you were to argue it being a matter of shaders, you should certainly be able to use this as proof. He still looks notably paler, at least to me. Also, I know I already mentioned it with the Overwatch 1 example, but his fucking concept art has him nowhere near this pale. Hello? So, let's take a moment to brainstorm why in the Britney Blazes Blizzard would give him such a lighter complexion. I know that some people with paler skin tones can lose their tan. Some people lose them over the winter after a whole summer of sunbathing. There's also the fact that there are genetic factors that tend to make people with fairer skin burn as opposed to tan, or make them more predisposed to losing their tan. But are we supposed to, assume that's what's going on here? Are we really supposed to accept that Jesse lost any melanin he had after a year or two off the streets and in new Overwatch? That seems like a pretty crumbly argument to me, especially when you consider his skin tone was the same going from young Deadlock McCree, who lived a hard life of crime on the streets, to a slightly older Blackwatch McCree, who had a home and a bed and who I at least assume wasn't spending as much time in the direct sunlight, to base model McCree, who is back to being an outlaw with no real place to call home. If we're supposed to believe that he's Snow White in Blizzard's wintry name because he's had a better life so far in Overwatch 2, which, mind you, has some funky implications to it on its own, why wouldn't Blackwatch McCree also have a lighter complexion? It seems like a bit of a stretch to me. And especially if we take a look at the Halloween spray, which depicts characters as children dressed up as their adult selves. He's clearly not a super pale little kid. Now, I guess you could chalk that up to something convoluted, like, oh, these sprays are their adult selves, just as children, so he has his adult tan. But then, wouldn't his adult self be tan later in the future still? To lose a lifetime of sun because he grew a beard and got new clothes sounds weird to me. The only reason I hang on to this argument, if you want to call it that, is because, in my opinion, that's the only way Blizzard could try to excuse making him this much lighter in the sequel. It's still not a good excuse in my opinion, but it's the only one I can really think of. I mean, someone pointed out that, hey, we haven't seen the rest of the cast yet, so maybe it's not a case of lightening McCree specifically, and it's a case of the new art directors making the whole roster of heroes lighter. But, that's not a good thing. If I'm being entirely honest, looking at the color swatches I made instead of just looking at pictures on Twitter and Tumblr and all that shit, it feels more like they made the super light merchandise skin tones his actual canon Overwatch 2 hue. I mean, if they were upset about people saying they turned him Mormon white in most of his merch, I'm not sure that this was really the way to combat it. Now, as I say this, keep in mind that I, myself, am white. So paper white that my teachers always thought I was drawing on my arms because my veins were always so dark blue and visible. It's not my place to, call this whitewashing or any other manner of racism. It's not my place to speak over people of color who may have an opinion on this, and that's not my goal in talking about this subject today. With that said, I think that it is partially my duty as someone who enjoys the game and consumes Blizzard content to say that this is a little fucking weird to say the very least. Like, the whole situation with them never having a consistent palette for his skin from medium to medium, while his signature red serape and accessories seem to be colored correctly, while also not having anywhere near the same variation between comics and sprays and models for other characters, is weird. I'd really love to hear your take on this, though. Do you have a different reason why they would have lightened his skin this much? Do you think this was perfectly done to combat headcanons of McCree's heritage? Do you think that this was just an oopsie doodle on Blizzard's end and he'll be back to his tan self when the game releases in 2020 whatever? Do you not care and think this is just dumb to even be kerfuffed about? Let me know in the comments down below. I know I sure hope that they at least tweak it before the full game comes out. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want. As always, you don't have to, but if you do, I'll see you in the next one. I think this goes without saying, but I will put it out there anyway. I know this video is a little different than usual. And even though I'm putting it out there in a more entertaining and humorous way, I still expect people to act like grown-ass adults in the comment section. I know I'm expecting a lot of YouTube, but if I see any racist shenanigans going on in there, your comment will get deleted. And with that, I hope you have a scrabdangulous day. Later, skater. I'm so ready. I see you here with the lisps.